Today, our government introduced changes to the criminal code that address the gap in the law resulting from the recent Supreme Court decisions on the defense of extreme intoxication. The changes in Bill C-28 will hold individuals accountable and criminally responsible for violence committed in a state of negligent extreme intoxication. The gap in the law was created following the court's recent decisions in Sullivan, Chan, and Brown. For non-lawyers, the issues that these decisions dealt with can seem confusing. How can someone who commits a violent crime while extremely intoxicated not be responsible for their actions? Where does personal responsibility kick in? The existing section took away a very particular defense for violent crimes, one where a person who was intoxicated to such a degree that they were no longer acting voluntarily. It's called the defense of extreme intoxication, which is a kind of automatism. The court was clear. This defense is available in only the rarest of circumstances. It is almost never available when alcohol alone is the source of the accused's intoxication. There have only been a handful of extreme intoxication cases in Canadian history. That is because the accused first needs to prove, using expert evidence, that they were in a state of extreme intoxication where they had no understanding or control over their actions. This is not about being really drunk or really high. By striking down this section of the criminal code, the court's decisions left a gap in the law. Bill C-28 fills that gap. It does so in a way that is both constitutional and fair. So what does Bill C-28 do? It amends the criminal code so that an individual would be held responsible for the violence they commit while in a state of extreme intoxication if they ended up in that state through their own criminal negligence. I'm going to repeat this in English because it's important. Being drunk or high is not a defense for committing criminal acts like sexual assault. Again, I repeat, being drunk or high is not a defense for committing criminal acts like sexual assault. That was the law before the Supreme Court decisions, and that remains the law today. And all Canadians need to understand that clearly. Intoxicated violence has serious and devastating impacts. This is especially true for some of the most at-risk people in our society: women, children, and Indigenous women, girls, and 2S LGBTQIA+ persons.
Minister Lametti, can I ask you why you feel confident this is charter-proof?
Thank you, Tom, for that question. Well, the court, as you know, in the decisions in Sullivan, Chan, and Brown, gave a couple of potential ways forward. We have effectively chosen one of those ways, but we've also heard from stakeholder groups. We've also heard from legal. We've done a fair bit of work over the last 5 weeks, speaking to legal experts, both internal and external. And to be honest, we knew that this provision was vulnerable. And so we have been thinking about this. So we think we've got a good way forward. We think the court has shown a way, and we think we've taken that way forward in a very thoughtful way.
For both Minister Lametti and Minister Ian, you were talking about the concerns about the misinformation that's out there regarding this idea that drunkenness can be used as an excuse. What do you what are your concerns about that? Could you explain, like, what is the danger here?
Well, I'll turn it over to Marcy in a minute, but you just don't want people thinking, on the one hand, that they're vulnerable because if they're with someone who's drunk, they might be somehow vulnerable or more vulnerable. And on the other hand, you don't want someone to think, oh, I can have a few drinks and do whatever the blank I want. And that doesn't exist, and that hasn't existed, and it will continue to not exist. But I turned over to Marcy and
Yeah. Thank you so much, Minister, and I'd love to build on that question. Can I just have the reporter's name, please?
It's Tom Parry from CBC.
Hi, Tom. Thank you so much for the question. When my daughter came home and said that to me, I saw the fear in her eyes. And what Blaze represents is fear from, young women in particular. This is what I was seeing on social media right across the country, who were afraid. She heads to university in the fall. And so to see something like this, it's fear, it's compounded fear. It's what am I going to meet when I get to school? What does this mean if I'm out this summer? What does this mean right now? And so the answer to the question is we don't want young women fearful out there, thinking that something like this could happen to them and somebody could get away with something. And that's why we're closing this gap. It's the fear, Tom.